Hello and welcome to another episode of the Grit Daily Startup Show. Today you have your host Leonard Kim with Adam Pisk, the co-founder over at BruntWork. Before we get into anything, Adam, do you want to kind of talk us about your journey of how you got to BruntWork and what you were doing before and what led you down this path?
Sure. I've actually had staff offshore, outsourced staff since 2001,
Yeah,
and originally then it wasn't a done thing to do. It wasn't as common as it is now, and I was led down that path because I was in a very specialized manufacturing sector, and I just couldn't find the skilled people that I needed
yeah,
in Australia for those roles. So it led me overseas, particularly to the Philippines and then actually to Korea and some other locations. And then really, I'd applied that same understanding of scaling companies utilizing the best talent globally as a
yeah,
philosophy since 2001 for different companies that I'd consulted or worked with. It wasn't well, it was when the pandemic happened that I then sort of got that understanding that usually it was larger companies that utilized offshore
yeah,
teams. And in the pandemic, I saw a lot of smaller and medium sized businesses that couldn't go to the office and therefore were having to work remotely
yeah.
within their own cities. And so it sort of came to me and said, well, they're having to work remotely within their own cities, isn't much of a stretch to give them the ability to easily hire people offshore, because whether you're on the other side of the city and you got to deal with each other remotely, or you're the other side of the world and you got to
Yeah.
deal with each other remotely, it's pretty much the same thing. And so that led to really the creation of BruntWork, and the rest is sort of history.
That's kind of awesome. I remember back in 2001, no one was really going online to go and hire someone from overseas or anywhere else, really. Everyone was just filling up their offices, trying to bring people in. So to be that
Right.
early of an adopter is kind of crazy.
Yeah, well, again, I did it because back then I just couldn't find the people.
Yeah,
Australia, which is where I operated, is a small country, and I was bringing in a technology that was used in the US and Europe, but not that much in Australia. And so to
yeah.
get the skills and the engineering expertise, I had to go offshore. So yeah, 2001 was fairly pioneering. I definitely wasn't the first, but different industry now where the Philippines alone, I think, has 9 million people in the outsourcing sector.
Yeah.
Um, Very different to back then.
I forget exactly when I was first introduced to outsourcing, maybe around like 2008 to 2009, I think. But
Hmm.
some of the startups I worked with back then, we did some outsourcing. And even at that time, it was still kind of hard to go out and vet who was legitimate, who was good. There's a lot of people who promise a lot of things. So, how did you kind of go out there to really discover what was really in a remote worker that helps them accelerate and thrive, as opposed to people who are out there just saying that they could do certain things?
Yeah. That's the secret of hiring generally,
Yeah,
let alone outsourcing. I mean, back when you would have done it in 2008, that was almost when Tim Ferriss released his book, The 4 Hour Work Week.
yeah,
And that really sparked some of the interest in outsourcing. And back then, really, India is what Tim Ferriss had really talked
yeah,
about in his book. And that was, you would go on job boards and approach freelancers and do your own screening and hope for the best. And I think the difference now, and people can still do that. There's still a market for that, and there's now
yeah,
platforms that make that a lot easier, like Upwork and Fiverr, particularly for task based roles. Where people come to us is if they want to build a team, not just do a project, and they want to bring someone in their organization. The difference with us is we use a combination of AI technology that we've
yeah.
built, plus some really in depth experience in the countries that we're in. And we're in
Yeah.
23 countries, is where we
That's a
have
lot.
agents. Yeah, to have the understanding to match the right candidate with the right company and have the technology and the knowledge to do that in almost any industry, almost with any type of role that can operate remotely, and match skill versus
Yeah.
capability, and also to have the people on the ground to understand if someone has a resume, um, and the level of testing that we do and AI on top of that. How legit is this person? We know where they live. We've got their tax details, etc. Are they legit? And then test them on capability before we put them forward.
I think one of the good things about working in 23 countries is back when I was working with India, like I'd like write out some tasks, they wouldn't get it and get to do it until I'm already off work. You wouldn't be able to see the results until you're back at work.
Right.
So there was like this huge communication gap. I think working in 23 countries and having that user base everywhere who's out there delivering for all your clients that you have kind of fills that gap. And I think what's really neat is what you mentioned kind of about AI going out there and tying everything in. What kind of successes have you seen with bringing AI into your remote working force?
Look, the difference with AI enables you to do very very specific work at scale.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is to give you a sense of it, we get about 60,000 resumes every month
Wow.
applying to work for us.
Yeah.
60,000, right? So across 23 countries, we have about 450,000 candidates now that have done our skills and aptitude testing and are ready for work in our recruiting platform. And the thing with AI, it enables you to do and to get the data and do the analysis at scale. Now, we still have
Yeah.
a large recruiting team of several hundred people to help manage that when you're operating at scale. But again, it takes it to a whole new level. So we want to find our clients the best candidates globally,
Yeah.
and to do that, that's a lot of resumes and that's a lot of people. And
Yeah.
so AI really can give you that power to do that and the learning to continue to do that more effectively.
Yeah, of course. And I think one of the big accomplishments that you've kind of had through all this is in 4 years, you got your annual recurring revenue up to $75 million and you have no debt. And if you think about it, a lot of companies who try to do something similar, they might get stuck at like 6 figures a year, 7 figures a year. But to really reach 75 million, that one means you have a high client retention rate. Two, it means people who come on board are sticking around and really buying into the platform and buying into the workers. And three, whatever you're doing has to be working because if it wasn't, most people would be dropping off from the client list.
Yeah, look, I think the secret to this scaling, and there's a lot of reasons for it,
Yeah,
but one of the key reasons is that we need to be valuable to both our clients and to the staff.
yeah,
And I think a lot of our competitors miss that simple point, and it
yeah,
comes down to any business in terms of value. So, in terms of what our role is from the recruiting and aligning the best people, and then helping to provide the tools for our staff to perform well, and then providing consistent value for our clients and helping them scale, there needs to be a price point and a value proposition that makes sense for both sides. Otherwise,
yeah,
if you are making too much margin or not in it for the right reasons, your agents will leave you.
yeah,
Or if you're doing it on the other end, your clients will go, well, I'm not getting the value out of going to BruntWork. I might as well go direct or use platforms like Upwork
yeah,
or Fiverr. So I think for us, the real mission in this business sure is scaling and growing, and you've got to have a successful business, but
yeah,
what drives that more is we're a purely work from home operation.
yeah.
So all our staff work from home, and in the developing world, the usual commute time for someone to go to an office is about 2.5 hours each way.
That's a
So an
long
average
time.
person in the countries we operate spends 5 hours a day traveling. And the one of the real value propositions for our staff is if we can get you great clients at great pay, get 5 hours of your life back plus transportation costs down, the difference in quality of life is substantial. And that's the real motivation. So if you have that as the driver, that goes culturally through your whole business,
Yeah.
and you get buy-in.
I mean, me just thinking about if I'm an employee anywhere, if I could recapture 5 hours of every single workday of my life and get those 25 hours back, I think I'd be a pretty good employee.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's
yeah,
life changing when you
yeah,
think about it. And this isn't driving down the road in a nice Tesla for 2 hours listening to a Joe Rogan podcast.
yeah,
This is going in the back of a jeepney in the rain while you've queued up for 40 minutes, can't have anything out or it's probably going to get stolen. Like this is not a nice transportation experience on top of the 5 hours of your life that you get back.
yeah,
So there's a real mission behind it. Above other things that our staff get, private health insurance in countries that they're
Nice.
in is very significant.
Yeah.
That we provide time off, etc. So it's really about changing the lives of our agents. And again, if that resonates, they don't want to lose their jobs. They want to do well for their clients. The clients then get good results,
Yeah.
and that then has that snowball effect and helps you grow.
Yeah, about a little over a decade ago, I used to work over at American Honda, and I wasn't driving at the time, and I was getting paid, a tiny bit more than minimum wage. So I had to take
Mm-hmm.
public transportation for about 2.5 hours to and from work, and it was brutal. Like the days it rained and the umbrella flipped upside down, and you get poured all over. The days where you're just too tired to go and take that walk down the street to the train stop and so forth. It's a hassle. And for people to have to do that for 5 hours a day, I can really sympathize with what they have to go through. And to kind of go out there and solve that, get the benefits with health and so forth, that's really creating a great working environment for them.
Yeah, and that's really what then drives that retention. And
Yeah,
again, no matter how bad it was for you in the developed world, when you go into the
yeah,
developing world, everything is harder, and the
yeah,
trains are dirtier and more crowded, and it's even the queues are even longer. So yeah, it's you can relate, but it's
yeah.
times 10.
Yeah, I mean, I just watching like social media videos of like other countries and seeing how their transportation system works. You just watch that and it's just like, wow, people actually have to go through that, and it's kind of crazy. So it's a good thing that you're really going out there and solving those problems. Flipping it around to the other side, though, like you're working with a lot of small and medium-sized businesses who are going into remote working for the first time with COVID, and this is the first time they're really going and working with anyone remotely, whether it's a employee in their city or someone who's overseas. So there's that big learning challenge for them where it's completely different. Like I know when COVID happened, like I was working at USC's hospitals at the time, and for hospital staff to go home, that's kind of crazy in itself, right? So for
Yeah.
a lot of these small businesses, how did they kind of go out there and adapt, and how are they able to successfully turn around and get this remote staff working so quickly and so in tune with everything that they were doing?
Look, it's not an easy process
Yeah,
to be honest.
yeah,
Like if your company is small and it's not used to managing people generally, or if it's not used to managing people remotely, there's a learning curve. And the successful companies that do it understand that there's a learning curve, and they also understand that managing someone remotely means you've got to be realistic with what you're
yeah,
looking to achieve, and you've got to be very clear in your communication.
yeah,
And that's one thing. It's not that, I mean, one of the challenges we get is that someone will come on a small business
yeah,
and the founder, the entrepreneur, the owner is stressed out and there's so
yeah,
much things they need to do. And they just want someone from the other side of the world at $5 an hour to come in and solve everything.
yeah.
And that's just a recipe for failure.
It doesn't
And
sound like it works.
but again, the problem that they have is they go, I'm just too busy to train someone or
Yeah,
put in the processes. I just need someone to come in and work from day one, and that just wouldn't happen locally. Let
yeah,
alone that a virtual assistant from the Philippines or Colombia or somewhere else
yeah,
can go in and do that. So it's really important to set expectations and actually not even proceed with companies that have an unrealistic view, because we don't want it to fail. It's
yeah,
not good for the client. It's not good for us. It's not good for the agent. So we need companies that go, this is someone I'm bringing into my company. They're working for me. I need to train them like I would anyone else. Sure, they're going to have skills and they're
yeah,
going to be smart. And then in terms of managing them, I need to set really clear expectations and outcomes and KPIs
yeah,
to keep them accountable and communicate properly. And I need to have the right technology in order to do that. And that's when it succeeds.
yeah,
And there's other factors too. We've got to align the recruiting to make sure we've got someone that aligns into the culture of the business, etc. But it's not easy the first time to do it. It's game changing once you understand how
yeah,
to do it. But going into it, you've got to be realistic and you've got to put the time in. And if you expect to hire someone from the Philippines at a low rate and they're going to come in and just improve everything from day one, then you're doomed for failure.
Yeah, I believe that. A few years ago, I was brought on as a marketing director for a remote position, and I had two people who were or research interns who've never done marketing a day in their life, and then they're just like, "Hey, they're marketers now. We're sticking them underneath you." And these are
Yeah,
Americans who like live in like New Jersey, New York, who are like really smart, and like that learning curve to go out there and teach them everything. It's really, really, really difficult. So I really understand how that feels, especially if someone has unrealistic expectations to go out there and have someone go and build something up. I mean, in any type of workforce, whether it's here or whether it's overseas, it doesn't really matter. You got to take that time to go and train and educate people on exactly what you want them to do, because without that, it's all basically a recipe that's doomed for failure. So I understand that.
absolutely, absolutely. You need to be realistic, and you need to put the time in. And it's not a overnight solution that without any training. But once you get it, they become an invaluable, loyal part of the company. And not only do you get massive cost savings by doing
Yeah,
it, which is one factor, but again, it enables you to get the best person for that role globally, which is really what we try and put forward. So you get someone who's got skills, who wants the job, who works hard, who's reliable, uh, and you usually save 70% on
yeah.
top of that.
I feel like for a company to really like thrive with a platform like BruntWork, or with dealing with anyone who's going remote, like if you're investing in their team and if you're investing in them with your time, education, experience, your know-how, and holding their hands along the way, that you kind of get a lot more results than if you kind of go out there and just say, "Hey, go and do this and fix everything." Because I really believe that training and support and any type of role is really what goes out there and helps anyone thrive, whether they're in America, overseas, or anything.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely. So again, for us, the idea is understand the level of expertise that you need for a certain role. So I mean,
yeah,
I'm not saying hire someone who's got no understanding. I mean, you want to hire an expert and then teach them how you do it within their
yeah,
expertise. So if you need bookkeeping, we got a bookkeeper. You need a chartered accountant, sure, we got that too. But they may not know the tax law of New Jersey specifically, so
yeah.
train them on the tax law of New Jersey. But they're a chartered accountant. They've worked within US companies before, but they may not know that specific state jurisdiction. Train them on that. But hire an expert, but then train.
Yeah. And I think the good thing about what you have going on is the people are experts. They understand it at the general level. They just have to be those certain nuances for each and every single state and every single operation for any type of company. To kind of go and familiarize them on that, you have much more of an advantage to go out there and help these people thrive and be an essential part of the workforce. And I think it's really, if you think about it, how any type of hiring process works, because a marketer doesn't usually go out there and stick to working in the same industry for their entire life. They might be in finance one day, healthcare the next, and so forth. But learning those nuances for every single new thing that they're doing, that marketing skill carries over no matter where they go. But having those nuanced lessons throughout the way, really, it just helps pave down the path so people can become really successful.
Yeah, and look, the thing is, I think that's more common in the developed world to
Yeah.
switch careers, and it's more, and people are more open to it. In the developing world, it's less common to switch
Mm.
um, where your like what your I suppose what your job title is. You
Yeah.
advance in your career, but it wouldn't be usual for a marketer to move to finance, for
Yeah.
example. In the developing world, you generally get that loyalty to the profession and to companies
Hmm.
that now in the developed world is less
Yeah.
loyalty, in terms of it's still a market where what can the company do for me as opposed to what can
Yeah.
I do for the company mentality. Whilst the developing world, there's that grateful recognition of a regular and good paycheck,
Yeah.
and that enables a higher degree of loyalty.
But what you just mentioned, it's kind of interesting because over in the States, over in America, a normal person's sticking around at a job for maybe 2 to 5 years. But if people in developing countries are loyal to their craft and the company that they're working at, that could be a 10, 20, 30, 40 year engagement. That could be until they retire. Like like back in the days when people used to work at a company and get a gold watch at the end of their tenure. It's kind of like that again if you really think about it.
It hasn't changed in
Yeah.
Asia.
Hmm.
In that sense, in a lot Asia and a lot of South America too,
Yeah.
and Latin America, it hasn't changed. It's always been that way, and it continues to be now. Obviously, younger generations, let's see what
Yeah.
happens. But again, you got a different appreciation for the companies that are paying you there, and you don't have the same safety net that
Yeah.
you do in the US or in Australia. Or so, if in these countries, unfortunately, if you lose your job, you don't eat.
Yeah.
So the consequences um, I suppose not doing your job well or taking advantage of it, etc., are significant.
Yeah.
So it means there's a lot more at stake, and therefore you do your best.
Yeah, and I could definitely see that. Like the feast and famine rate is a lot higher than in the U.S. Here, something goes wrong, you get unemployment for a while, you get government benefits or so forth. Over there, if you don't have a paycheck, you don't have a paycheck, and that could just
Correct.
completely crush someone.
Correct.
Yeah,
You might get rice
yeah.
from the like that's what you might get. So
If you're lucky.
again, it just means that a job is valued
Yeah,
higher because there's no like the plan B then means I've got to get another job.
yeah,
It's not that I can fall back on the government or generally extended family because generally the one in the job is supporting the extended
yeah.
family. So it's just a different culture there in that sense.
And if you kind of really think about it, having that type of appreciation for your employer really goes a long way because they'll go above and beyond what a normal person would really go to. Like, and every single office setting I worked at with like 5,000 employees and so forth, like people are working half the day. The other half, they're just like looking at news sites, chatting, going to the water cooler, and all this other stuff. So I think with the type of commitment that they have and appreciation for their jobs, you're probably potentially even getting a better employee out of people.
Well, I would argue that, but look, there are benefits for an office environment.
Yeah,
There are things that those water cooler moments and bringing people together
yeah,
is a good thing to do. Again, but not at the expense of having someone travel 5 hours a day. That's
yeah,
where I think technology gets you almost there. I think it's
yeah,
great in person, but I mean, I travel. I've got my own team is in the Philippines and in Colombia, and I'm there 4 times a year in both locations
yeah,
with in-person events. I send out our clients go to their maybe once or twice a year. A lot of them do to see their staff and train them, etc. In person.
yeah.
We bring our staff together a couple of times a year
Nice.
to get that in-person connection and
Yeah,
strategy. So remote doesn't mean you're never going to see the people that you work with.
yeah,
It just means that you're going to have a better quality of life 99% of the time.
yeah,
And the other part is with those, when you talked about half the day you spend working, half the day is news sites and water cooler and whatever. We also found, and we ran analysis of this because we have had offices and we have had work from home.
yeah,
We've had substantial numbers in both. So we get data on that.
yeah,
Is that when you remove that and you make someone very output orientated, their productivity increases tremendously. The other part that increases tremendously is actually get more sleep when they're
yeah,
working from home and not traveling for 5 hours a day. So you get more productivity. And yes, and the online tools now, like you're in the US and I'm in Australia, are very good in terms of collective brainstorming. This
yeah.
is like I'm in a room with you. It's pretty close.
Yeah, it's pretty close.
It's not quite, but it's close, right?
Yeah,
And so if you said, well, if your choice is either you can do this and brainstorm and get to an outcome, or you got to travel 5 hours a day to meet with Leonard in person to get to an outcome, I'd find a way to do it over this way
well,
than to do it the other, right?
we probably have to take a 7-hour flight each to go and be if we want it to be
What are
every
you talking
day.
about? Seven for Australia to even
I'm
Los
in
Angeles is
I'm in
14
LA.
hours.
14,
Oh,
yeah.
you're in
So
LA,
seven
so
hours,
14 hours. So
yeah.
7 hours. Okay, we met in Hawaii, which is 9 hours from
Yeah.
Australia.
So I got the
So
6, you got the 9.
right, right. So
That would
I
be
mean,
tough.
yeah, yeah. So I'm just saying that there are a lot of benefits, And for in the developed world, in the US and Australia, etc., I'm not saying having an office is a bad idea. It's a
Yeah.
great idea if it's easy for people to get to and it makes
Yeah.
sense. There's benefits in that. But if you want to use the advantage of global staff and outsourced staff, it makes no sense. I think it makes no sense at all. There are
Yeah.
very few exceptions, I think, to that rule. There are some clients of ours that need an office that we have for where they've got a specific type of technology that you just can't utilize
Yeah.
in a home environment. We do a lot in the biotech space.
Yeah.
So we're setting up laboratories, etc., and they need to test people. It's got to be physical. So those type of things we need a physical presence for.
Of course.
Most roles people can work from home.
Yeah, there's a lot of roles where people could kind of work at home. Well, we're kind of getting close to the end of the show. Were there any final words that you wanted to leave with everyone, Adam?
Look, if you listen to this podcast and you're interested in outsourcing, mention this podcast. I'll give you a $500 credit to your first invoice. It's USD for anyone outside of that. So we make it really easy to try us.
Yeah.
There's no obligation in terms of getting candidates. You go through the recruiting process for free. That risk is on us. You only start paying once we find you a candidate that you want to move forward with. It's month by month. You can change your agent at any time within the first 90 days. We make it really simple for businesses to go, I want to give this a shot. And we help you at every step of the way. Plus, if you get a $500 credit for the first month, then why wouldn't you do it? So
Yeah,
if you're on
exactly.
the fence about it, you should try it. And you can contact us through our contact form or email me, adam@bruntwork.co, and we'll look after you.
Yeah, so you have a low barrier to entry, a $500 credit. You're not happy with the person, you can swap them out anytime over 90
Yeah,
days. Sounds exciting. Sounds worth giving a shot if you haven't thought about it, or if you're thinking about it and want to even to see how it works. Sounds like a good deal.
yeah, it is. So email me and I'll set you up or with my team if you're listening to this.
Awesome. Well, everyone, I wanted to thank you so much for joining us for another show of this Grit Daily Startup Show. BruntWork, you can find them at bruntwork.co. And once again, this is Leonard Kim and Adam Pisk over at BruntWork. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.